Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Cascadia Rising 2016 and the impetus for putting in this proposal for Cascadia Rising 2022. So when Cascadia Rising 2016 occurred, as a region, as a state, we did not go out for or get additional federal funding. So there was essentially like a state exercise officer, and then each local jurisdiction and agency kind of dedicated staff time to exercise planning. But a lot of time and effort went into that. But I don't think it was fully coordinated. From what I remember, the MESL, which is the Master Scenario Event List, was not necessarily deconflicted or made the same across the whole state. So some examples were like, is the airport open or closed, and there not being a good answer, or an overall like state controller that you could call to get the answer. We had different rumors of like different numbers of National Guard troops like deployed for our players to use, and we had no idea if that had been made up by a player at the state level or if that was really something that was occurring. Also, I think that especially because the exercise was the first 3 days after a Cascadia disaster, there was little sort of regional interaction or interaction across EOCs. It just seemed like everyone was sort of like focused internally on what was going on in their specific agency or jurisdiction. So this proposal was submitted with support from City of Portland, Port of Portland, City of Gresham, Washington County, Clark County. I would say that tentatively, depending on the other proposals, funding level, perhaps Clackamas and Multnomah and Columbia counties might be interested in joining this too. So the proposal is mainly for exercise documentation support. So each agency will have to develop like player handbooks, handbooks for controllers, simulators, evaluators, evaluation guides, those types of things. With this proposal, ideally we'd be able to work smarter and not harder and develop those at the regional level that could be either quickly adapted or just used wholesale at the local level. And then also a lot of work on that MESL, which again would just kind of put everyone on the same page in the region, so we'd be seeing the same things. We could also script regional coordination and regional play into the exercise versus kind of being contained alone in each place. Also, support for the master scenario event list. It's kind of it's like wonky, but it's like it tells a player like you do this, and then it tracks what's supposed to happen and what the end state would be, which could be like a resource request, or it could be just like I put this information in my situation status, or different things like that. But it's very time consuming to create. For like an exercise as big as Cascadia Rising, you need about, I don't know, 300, I might say, like individual lines, maybe even more. Also, it's a 4-day exercise, so like when I did it the last time, things had gotten so out of control the first day that I stayed up all night writing it for the second day because I couldn't tell what had happened or what had not happened, or all this other stuff's going on at the state and the federal level, but also at least in the big city, there were like small nonprofits who had heard about Cascadia Rising and were suddenly playing, who we had never met before. So they're putting information in. It's just very hard to keep track. And there is a national exercise program that may provide support for this. So I'm submitting a proposal this week, and depending on the level of funding from the national exercise proposal, it could offset the UASI project altogether. It could like maybe be half from each, depending on how much money they might want to give us from the national exercise program. That program is currently non-competitive, so I'm trying to get that in as quickly as possible. And Cascadia Rising is the national level exercise this time, which I don't think it was last time. Okay.
Can we clarify, the National Exercise Program doesn't give you funding, they give you contract support.
Right, but depending on their
The level of contract support,
yeah.
Then you wouldn't need this.
If you're willing to do the whole region.
So
Yeah.
basically we say, this is what we like, can you give us that, or any portion of this? And then see what they say.
Yeah, just to talk to Courtney about it the other day, even if we get that, sometimes that having worked on the contractor side of it, sometimes you don't always get what you ask them. They say, well, we'll provide you with staff for the region, we won't give you controls and evaluators. So this funding, even if we get it, we could then get even more specific.
Yeah, I was wondering if you still needed something here to help.
All depends on
Yeah.
what and he gives, but it allows us could allow us to really get down to some stuff.
So you'd be using this funding for a contractor of choice here, having survived top off 4 and the fiasco that was. And then during this Cascadia, almost every hospital in our region dropped out because it got so confusing and so disconnected. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do you think this would actually draw groups in and allow them to become better organized a little? I need a little bit more, and based upon the contractor, we've had some interesting contractors in the region over the years that have just not been, and I guess I'm just trying to understand.
No, I totally agree with you, and I think in addition to it being the contractor, I think it has to be us as a region agreeing to not test everything, agreeing to not, right? We have to agree on 3 objectives, 4 objectives, and if you're doing something else, you're not doing something else. And so I think that's a big part of it too, is that it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And in that, you really lose any consistency or coherence or understanding. And I also think for the effort of work that goes into it, you don't get nearly the value. You'd get just as much value if you did it as a single agency. Like, we seem to lose the value of all participating on the same day because there's so much going on internally that you can't look externally. So that's why it makes more sense to me to get contractor support than to sideline 1 or 2 jurisdictional staff for an entire year to plan it, versus the contract support. So, but yeah, I don't have a great answer for that one. I think we really have to agree with each other as a region.
I think I'm just throwing it out because, I bet first 3-day thing was stupid because we all know everybody's just picking up the pieces, so.
Yeah. Well, and essentially in FEMA's presentations, they'll say that's what we learned, is that we're still trying to figure out where our kids are and where to go on the first 3 days. So yeah, that was a lot of work to figure that out, that a lot of us could have predicted.
That's why the hospitals dropped out, because we all decided that's what we'd be doing,
So this person would this contractor would plug into what's happening at the state, federal planning level, right? Those folks learn lessons just like we did, and so the goal is to kind of make sure that they're looking out for things like that. We all have our lessons learned from our after action reports, and that they would kind of help hold us all accountable, so that we agree to, so the scope creep doesn't happen again. Is that the goal?
I mean, I think the scope creep is on us, but yeah, in the exercise design process, you can try to facilitate getting to that consensus when you do like the initial planning meeting and the mid-planning meeting and the final planning meeting.
Okay.
So this would be just focused on our region, right? Okay. And they would be deconflicting with the state that may go in different directions? Okay.
Well, to ensure they align with the state code.
Yeah.
And the national.
Plugging into what's happening with the state, yeah,
Right.
and keeping it, again, like, all of us, like, we all individually try to keep a handle on what's going on with the state. We could have one person or one contract team doing that on our behalf.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, okay.
Right.
I just,
Yeah, and again, kind of going back to the measles, which is a little wonky, but if the feds and the state are developing a whole lot of things that they want to happen at the local level and the support that they expect to provide and things that they expect to be doing with the locals, well, I don't think like Multnomah County needs to create a 300-line measle if the feds are creating 100 lines that have to do with Multnomah County. You know what I mean? So someone that's actually bridging that gap and connecting it, versus kind of like what we had last time, which is like we each made one. And then they
They
just.
all crossed over.
Right, they didn't work, yeah. No, I get it, I get it.
Yeah, or even conflicting between like Portland and Multnomah and Clackamas and Washington. So that was all done by jurisdictional staff last time. So it's like quite a bit of work.
I learned a lot. That was a great red team.
Okay, thank you, Courtney.